one for the Crochet Garments with Confidence Summit 2023. So we have just watched the long-awaited video lesson of the day.
Awesome.
It was all about tension, all about gauge, and it was done by the fabulous Sarah from Ned and Mimi. Here she is. Let's welcome
I can't
our beautiful guest.
There she is.
Hi.
Hi,
Hi,
Sarah.
guys.
So we've had people saying they've been waiting for this video. They wanted to learn more about tension, more about gauge, and we're so happy that they loved your video. Everybody was amazed at, like, in-depth explaining. The slides were beautiful. So we're very happy to welcome you to this Q&A, and we're just going to wait for a few people to pop over, because I'm pretty sure, judging by the chat going on underneath that live premiere of your video, I'm judging by that this chat next to me is going to explode with questions. But before we get into those, let's just remind ourselves about the We Crochet giveaway that we've got going on. So if you are able to scroll, oh, here they come. If you're able to scan the QR code, do so and fill out the form to be in with a chance to win $40 gift card. And I'm going to cut this short because we're going to lose track of these comments all coming in. Hannah just popped the link in the chat as well. And we will share the link with you, because the giveaway is open till Tuesday, 6 a.m. EST, 11 a.m. BST. So plenty of time to enter. And yeah, let's have a look into the chat. I'm seeing the first comments we need to bring up on the screen, because this is what I was talking about.
So amazing. Sarah, honestly. Oh. And so everyone, if you haven't watched it and you are catching this before the end of Sunday, you need to go and watch it whilst the summit is still happening. And then come back to this, and this will make much more sense, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. So
it's exactly the same. Thank you for such an amazing video. It was so helpful. And then Facebook doesn't tell us who you are, but loved your video. Thank you for participating. Yay! So when Veronica and I got together to plan all of this, like, we were going through everyone, weren't we? As we said, like, to who do we ask about this, who do we ask about that, and then, like, something as massive as gauge and as technical as gauge, I was like, we have to ask Sarah. We have to ask Sarah, because you're like such a technician, but you explain things so well, and I think that's what everyone is saying from this video. So thank you.
Oh my goodness, thank you. Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because I don't think gauge is the most exciting topic. Like, it's kind of the thing everybody wants to skip, but it's so important. It's so important, especially for garments. I mean, you just have to start with it. There's no choice but to get your head around it, really.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Lots of people say that they just ignore it because they're scared of it. Like blocking, like all these things, like they're just like, it'll be fine. And it's like, no, it might be if you're lucky, but really it won't be. So, you have to do it.
It's an important step, and obviously we hope that Sarah's video has convinced you to pay more attention to the tension, to your gauge swatch, because as Sarah said, it's a perfect opportunity to see what the fabric's gonna do as well. You can practice your stitch as well on like a smaller pattern before you commit to a bigger project, and before you make sweater in a stitch. Because sometimes, I don't know about you girls, but sometimes when you start with a certain stitch and you say, yeah, it looks beautiful, but I just hate making it.
Yes.
And I'm like,
I've done that, and then you're like, nope.
Yeah, I'm like, nope. Or sometimes when you go like a 2-row repeat, I seem to like enjoy one row more than the other.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, and so when you say like you've got some nice fancy stitch on one row, and then you have to go like back in single crochet, so you crochet on the same side, and I'm like, oh, it's a single crochet row. I don't like this one.
Sure.
So, tension. I have got a question that we have had earlier in one of the other chats, but we've saved it for you, Sarah, because we think that it's appropriate here. So, does it make any difference when I buy a ball of yarn and it says crochet hook 6, but can I use an 8 or a different one that is stated on the label?
Okay, that's a really good question, actually. So what's on the label is a guideline. This is the way I treat it anyway. So it's a guideline, and it's kind of giving you roughly, if you're an average crocheter with an average tension, this hook might be okay. But really, you need to look at what's in the pattern, because it doesn't matter what it says in the label. And if you're anything like me, you have lots of skeins or balls of wool lying around with no label. So you don't even know where to start. Yeah. So what matters is what's written in the pattern. And even the hook size given in the pattern is also just a guideline, just a starting point. If you crochet differently to the designer, you might use a completely different hook, and that is absolutely fine. Like, I crochet really tightly, and I've had to try and kind of loosen up because I was having such awful problems with gauge that eventually I kind of had to acknowledge, like, it is me. It's not all these patterns. It's
all
me.
these patterns going wrong.
Yeah, all the patterns. Yeah, why are things always too small? No, so yeah, it is me. So I've kind of had to loosen up. But if you don't want to really adjust your tension or your style of crocheting, then you can just change up the hook size and yeah, just do what works for you, as long as you can match the gauge and the pattern. The hook size is not set in stone.
Yeah, because I've heard somewhere before, like I don't personally buy knitting patterns because I'm an awful knitter, but I've heard somewhere that some of the knitting patterns, they don't actually give you a needle size. They actually just give you a tension, and you are then to go ahead, make your tension swatch, and find your own size of the needles you need to use.
Oh, yeah. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I've heard that before. I'm like,
Force everyone to have to do a gauge swatch, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I feel like it's nice to have a starting point, though. I'd like to know. Yeah. And I think after a while, sorry, go ahead, Veronica.
No, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, after a while, I think you get to know your own tension. So you'll know, with a worsted weight yarn and a 5mm hook, this is what I usually get stitches wise or something. And so you can kind of tell by looking at a pattern, oh, this person obviously crochets much looser than me, so I'm going to have to change my hook size or whatever.
That was my only pearl of wisdom that I thought I will share for this section. This is it. This is all I've got. Is that with your gauge swatches, when you've done, because, like, you know, if you're working with a category 3 weight yarn and you're doing your gauge swatch over double crochet stitches, like, when you've done that, and you know that, keep that swatch, and then you can go back to it. And then when you're looking for yarn to use for another project, you'll be like, oh, what yarn? Label it with the yarn that you've used and the hook size and everything. And then you've got it. It's ready. It's done for you. So you can reuse, and you can learn so much from your previous swatches, I think. I don't know if that's helpful. But I feel
that's really helpful. And it's handy as a designer too, because if you've worked with one yarn, you know your gauge, so that's kind of nice to be able to just go with that.
About wiggle a lot today, like you can do the wiggle test and you can see what drape it has and all that kind of, and like it just builds up a picture and that knowledge base to know what yarns work for you with what size hook and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, keep your swatches, I would say.
Definitely.
Oh, we've got some questions popping up. We have a question. There are some designers who recommend to block swatches. Some do not. What is your personal recommendation?
So I'm going to give the most annoying answer ever and say it depends. So if, like, in some patterns, it will tell you that the gauge measurement is given blocked. So in that case, block your swatch and take your measurement. If it's not given, if the instruction isn't given and you're not sure, usually what I will do is just make my swatch and measure it. And if it's pretty close, I'm happy and I can go ahead. If it's off by a little bit, I'll just have a look at the end of the pattern and see if they're telling you to block your item. So then I'll block it and measure it again with the intention that the gauge will be spot on at that stage. But yeah, it's a difficult one if the pattern doesn't say whether you need to block the swatch or not. But I guess the kind of rule of thumb is if the finished item is going to be blocked, you can safely block the swatch and then take your measurement. But like, blocking can correct little things as well, and I know you've covered that earlier, so it's a bit of a kind of fuzzy area. sometimes.
Everything interlinks, doesn't it? Because we've just spoken to Claire about chunky yarn, and she was saying, like, absolutely, you need to block your gauge swatch for chunky yarn because there's so little room for error with chunky.
Yes, and you would think it would be the opposite, but actually it really matters. Like half a stitch in a bulkier, super bulky yarn is going to make so much difference.
Yeah, absolutely, because your little half of stitches will eventually add up to one stitch, and then another stitch, and another stitch, and then you're gonna end up with something, rather off the size you want to make.
Whereas a fingering weight yarn, you can kind of go, I've done it myself, where you're just like, I'll be all right.
If I just stretch this a little bit,
So that's the thing. There are so many variables, aren't there? There's so many variables about what the stitch is, what the yarn is you're using, you know, how you're holding your hook. And like you said yourself, like if you change your hook hold slightly or change the way you're looping, all that kind of stuff, it dramatically changes your stitches. So, oh gosh, lots of people coming in and commenting. Someone saying it's one of my biggest struggles. You're not alone with that, I don't think, especially row gauge.
Oh yeah, this is the most common question that I get about gauge. Maybe you guys too. And I think someone had even asked this earlier under the YouTube video before it played. So I know it's like a really burning question. Okay, so my answer for this is that the good news is if you have met stitch gauge, you've done most of the work. So that's the hard thing. So you know that your tension is okay, your hook size is okay, and you're really, really close. For the row gauge, I used to struggle with this too until I learned about, is it called the golden loop or the magic loop? I always get this mixed up. It's the golden loop, isn't it? So it's basically the first loop you pull up with your hook. So that loop is going to determine the height of your stitch. So if you need your stitches to be a bit taller, you pull that loop up a little bit more. And if you need them to be a little bit shorter, you just pull it up a little bit less. Now, I mean, if you're making a scarf, the row gauge, maybe you could kind of just keep going a little bit extra or a little bit less until the length is what you want. But if it's a garment, it's really, really hard to get away with doing that. I mean, you can extend length in certain places like the torso where there's no shaping or sleeves or something. But in most garments, there's going to be some shaping up around here, up around the bust. And depending on the construction of the garment, you're going to want to try and get both right. But yeah, that golden loop, I think, is the key. Unless you've anything else to add now, but for me, that was kind of the big thing.
Something that we came across recently in the cardigan collection I did last year was that it also the construction of your garment will then dictate, like if it's a side across, it's more important to get
that right. Is true.
So for one of mine that I have done quite a lot of side across, and I'm like, your row gauge is far more important than your stitches. You can add and subtract stitches to the length really easily. So I think it's also really important to, and that's what we're saying throughout the whole summit, isn't it? You really need to dig down into the pattern that you're making and figure out the construction, the gauge, the stitch, everything, and how it all works together. So just to complicate things more, people.
Yeah, but everything is interlinked. Every topic that has been talked about today is kind of dependent on or depends on something else. So I think just getting little nuggets from everywhere and trying to put them all together that's what'll get you over the line in the end.
That's it. It's an entire process, isn't it?
Definitely. Julia, before learning the importance of gauge, I would make a different size of garment. I would make a larger size or smaller size, but it wasn't happen in the end. And then she's commented down afterwards, Julia has said, now I make wearables that actually fit. Yay! And that is the difference. That is the difference, isn't it? Because I think that is the temptation, and that's what I would have done and did do. I just made a different size. So I was like, well, it's too big for me. Then I'll make the size down, which is not a bad logic, is it? It's not a bad logic, but there is an easier way or a better way. Because as designers, we have designed them so that they will really fit you nicely if you meet the gauge. What else have we got?
Trying to keep up now with the questions.
I've lost my place now. Oh, here we are. Do designers include the yarn used in the gauge swatch in the yardage needed to complete the project?
So I'm going to say probably not explicitly, but I can only speak for myself on this, but I'll always add a little bit to the yardage on top of what I've calculated, because look, it's just better to have a little bit extra, I always think. And I mean, okay, with chunky yarn, you're going to use a little bit more to do your gauge swatch, but with most yarns, the gauge swatch isn't going to take up so much yarn that you're going to run out. But having said that, I have frogged swatches before to finish a project.
I was saying that earlier. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've definitely done that.
Yeah, so don't do that, but I mean, you can do that if you have to, and then you can keep your swatch, but at least nothing has gone to waste. So that's,
yeah, I would imagine that most of it. So I add 10%.
Yeah,
of
I
an
do the same.
already healthy
Yeah, I do the same.
number anyway, and then if
Yeah.
it's, and I always, if when I then work out the amount of balls, if it's anywhere near the top of a ball,
Yeah.
I can add another one.
Yeah.
Add another one. Yeah.
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 I don't want people to run out. It's how awful would that be? Like if you've got spare yarn, like we can always use spare yarn, can't we? So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I would say so. Right, where are we? Oh, Kira has asked, how does tension change when you do decreases? I find myself pulling tight when the rest is looser. I don't know if this applies.
That's a good question. I suspect maybe on the decrease rows, you could be concentrating a little bit more, because I find if I'm really concentrating, things are always tighter. And that's why in the video I say that you need to make the gauge swatch big, because you're concentrating a lot at the start. And those rows for me are 90% of the time, they're tighter than when I get to the top of the gauge swatch. So I wonder if it's something like that. Yeah, it's kind of hard to say, really.
I struggle so with meeting gauge. Latest project, I made the gauge widthways after doing everything to get there. However, I'm 10 inches short doing that with what worked on the gauge. Gosh, that's a big difference.
10 inches. Wow.
10 inches, my gosh, that's a big difference, isn't it? It's like something that's that different. I would say you probably need to go back to the drawing board, don't you?
I think so. Yeah, 10 inches is an awful big difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
Unless that was meant to be 10 centimeters.
Yeah, maybe 10 centimeters. But yeah, if it's really, really far out, I would just start again. Would you?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, I think I would too.
Yeah, and I think that's probably then something to do with, probably if you're using the hook that the designer has used, that it's probably then to do with the yarn that you've chosen. Because we were talking to Ray Lynn, we were saying like even like in a category 4 weight yarn, there's a massive variation, isn't there? And it might just be that you've chosen a really thin version of the yarn that doesn't match very well with what the designer used. So your gauge will be off, even if you crochet exactly the same as them, your gauge will be completely off.
Yeah, definitely. That's when we were talking about the different yardage within the same weight of yarn, that will give you an indication what kind of end of the thickness the yarn is, still within kind of DK, as we said before. But if you fit 250 meters into 100 gram ball of yarn, as opposed to 295 meters, there is going to be a lot of difference in the thickness. And that yarn is still classed as DK, but the thickness will be considerably different, which will then definitely show on the tension swatch, because that's what you start with, and then it's going to make a lot of difference on the finished project as well. Yeah,
and that's something that I get asked quite a lot is, for a pattern that I've just released, which is done in fingering weight yarn, someone has contacted me and said, can I make it in worsted weight yarn? And I try and gauge swatch it. And it's like you can try and gauge swatch it, but that will be so tight. That will be
it could be so stiff.
So stiff because it's so far away. Whereas maybe if you look for a category 2 weight yarn, if you're one category away because of the flux in the sizes of yarn, that might work. But anything that's more than two categories away, you can swatch it, but I just don't think it will work. Go back to go and find yourself some different yarn, I would say. Someone's asking, are these yes, are these Q&As going to be posted in the purchase course? Yes, we are going to save all of these links, and we will then add them once the weekend is all done, so you'll be able to watch them as many times as you like.
Absolutely. Yeah, because we've had a lot of comments from people that these Q&As are actually really, really informative as well. So yeah, we will definitely pop the links into the All Access Pass course for you to go back to and watch.
What we got here, found that the gauge of various designers is quite different, as in when I watch YouTube videos, I see some crochet quite a bit looser than others. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you lined us all up, we'd all be different.
Absolutely. That's where the tension is so important, because you get that basic starting point where you need to kind of meet the designer. You know, some people crochet really loose, some people crochet really tight, but if you've got the starting point in the middle, so that's where everybody needs to kind of meet for that particular pattern. That's why it's so important to start with the tension swatch, as Sarah explained in her brilliant video. Yeah.
And do both of you, have you checked, is your tension changed? Obviously, you said, Sarah, you've deliberately changed yours, but I've found that my tension has got tighter over the years that I've been crocheting, without me really realising, or without me doing anything to make that happen.
I haven't noticed a difference really. I just go for it and crochet, and then I do sometimes get people saying, "Gosh, that is so tight. I can't meet your gauge. You know, your tension is really, really tight." Then I get some people saying, "Oh, you know, I had to really change the hook size because it was so loose." And it's like, okay, so it's such a wide range of ways and techniques people use, that the tension is the starting point. So yeah, I haven't noticed a massive difference in my crochet, no.
I've just remembered, Veronica, remember the what project was it that we worked on together for Deramores? We did a crochet along, a blanket crochet along, didn't we? It was and do you remember we had a group chat of the 5 designers that were all doing it? You know what I'm going to say, don't you? And we all were trying to, because Sarah, we were making a different part of the blanket, and then it was all being put together. So we did like a week each, and we did these panels and stuff. And so we all had to basically work out with this same yarn our gauge. And like, we were miles apart, these 5 designers, and you would think we were, you know, using a DK weight yarn, we would be similar. Nope.
Yeah, it was a wide range, but then I think then we realized that the finished blanket is clearly going to be made by the same person.
Yeah, it was made by one person, so it didn't matter. It didn't matter at the end, but it just served to show like how different even us as designers are. You know.
Absolutely, yeah.
Oh, Celia's asking, what is the wiggle test? We all do the wiggle test. So when you make your swatch, like hold it up, make it, and that's why we say make it big enough that you can move it around and stuff, because that shows you what your fabric's going to be like in your garment. And give it a good wiggle and see how well it moves, and will that feel comfortable on you?
That's it, yeah.
My wiggle test, anyway. I don't know about anyone else.
That is the wiggle test, yeah. So you basically find out how the fabric would move on your body, you know, whether it's kind of loose and pliable, or whether it's going to be really stiff, which sometimes it's good for, you know, like jacket type cardigans, which you're going to wear as the outer layer. So if it's really stiff and that's what you're looking for, so yeah, that's the wiggle test with your tension swatch, to see how the fabric behaves when you're going to wear it and how it's going to move on your body. So yeah. Wiggle test.
It's actually, it might be called something else, I don't know. I found the same brand or type of yarns can have a wide variety of thicknesses, which would affect your gauge also. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's what we were saying.
So variable. And in fact, I had some yarn recently that was supposed to be the same thickness or weight. It's the same yarn but different colours, and the different colours, I started making it and I was like, this is not the same yarn. And I did the whole wraps per inch thing, and there were 3 wraps out in the exact same line of yarn. So yeah, you just have to,
quite a lot.
and that's going to affect your gauge as well. It's going to affect everything, isn't it? So it's all about the yarn. It's all about the yarn.
So have you got any special tools, Sarah, for measuring your tension or gauge swatches? Because I did a little video, and I think some people were a little bit surprised when I said this, but what I said in my quick reel, it was like people often measure their tension swatches with like the flexible tape measures, you know, from the flexible plastic. And I mean, I was surprised when somebody said this to me before, that they are not the best, because the flexible plastic stretches over time. You know, when you kind of pull on those tape measures, it could stretch quite a bit and actually give you a different measurement. So yeah, I have a couple of like a hard plastic or wooden gauge measures that I like to use.
Yeah, so I don't have those. I just use a normal ruler. Whatever.
ruler, yeah.
But every one of my kids' rulers is lying around, a hard ruler. Yeah, I don't use measuring tape because it's just not as accurate. And I mean, with a measuring tape, you can kind of get the measurement that you want sometimes. And it might not be completely accurate. So yeah, I use a hard ruler and I use pins. So I showed in the video. I don't know where I got this tip, but I don't know. I got it somewhere years ago, and it's the best tip ever because you just lay down the ruler, put in your pins, take away the ruler, and then what you get is what you get, and you have to count between those pins. And if the pin lands in the middle of a stitch, it's in the middle of the stitch, and you can't move it to get it to the edge of the stitch or the row or whatever. Yeah, so that's all I use. I don't have a gauge square or anything.
Yeah.
I'd imagine they'd be very useful. Sometimes, especially with crochet, I think if you have a stitch pattern that's like kind of lacy or has a big repeat, you're not going to fit into 4 inches. So the gauge squares are no good for that. So if it's just single crochet, double crochet, the gauge square is probably going to do perfectly. But for lots of crochet stitch patterns, I think just the ruler is, the handiest. So don't need to invest in any special equipment or anything. Just get a ruler.
Brilliant.
When I watched your video, Sarah, I felt properly like called out by that. I was like, oh gosh, that's me. I don't use pins. I use a rubbish old tape measure that's probably been stretched by the children, trying to strangle it.
They're playing tug of war with that one.
The stuff I make fits me, so I hope it. But just, again, it goes to show, like, this whole summit thing. Like, there are so many tips that we can pick up from each other. That's exactly what this whole thing is about.
Yeah, for sure. That wraps per inch thing just like is mind blowing to me. Like the fact that it doesn't matter what you wrap it around, you can wrap around anything. Like,
if people haven't heard of what so wraps per inch is a way of measuring yarn within an inch. So how many times it goes round in an inch, and you can do it round a ruler, or you can do it round one of these little doobry things, and it tells you how many wraps that is. So if you've got a ball of yarn that has lost its label, you can it's a really good way of working out what weight yarn it is. So, which again, I had never heard of wraps per inch until not that many years ago.
Same. It's
acquired knowledge, isn't it? That you're suddenly like, oh, hello, someone's talking about that, and I don't know what it is. And then you have to go and find it out and all that kind of stuff, don't you?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Where are we? Sorry, I've lost track with it. Here we are.
There we go.
Ever since I got involved in amigurumi, my tension is much tighter. Yes. Yeah, I can imagine that would happen. Yeah, because it does. Like, I can imagine if you make lots of chunky stuff where you have to try and keep fairly loose, then of course it would be, the opposite effect, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
that's really interesting.
Definitely, yeah.
Oh, this is interesting. Someone's saying that darker yarns seem to be thicker, seem to absorb the dye, maybe.
Oh, that's interesting.
Okay. I never thought of that. Again, this is amazing. Kira's saying, I'm not familiar with the term frog.
Oh.
Again, neither was I for a long time. So frogging is just where if you make a mistake and you need to pull your yarn back, you frog it.
That's it.
Called frogging.
I think it's because you kind of rip it. So you kind of rip it, and it sounds like a frog. So I think that's where it comes from, frogging. Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, someone else. I'm guilty of using a plastic measuring tape. Yeah, but you've got to think.
Like, do you know? Let me say, it's better than not using anything,
and for
better
sure.
than not measuring at all. Don't get me wrong. And if you're gonna use the plastic measuring tape, it's fine. Nobody's gonna throw you in jail. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
But if you use the plastic measuring tape for your tension swatch, and then you use the same one to measure your whole sweater and to measure your measurements, it's gonna be a uniform measurement, isn't it? Because you're using the same. If your inch is slightly off, it's gonna be slightly off across the board. So it's kind of gonna match up in the end. So. It's not the end of the world, but yes, when I first learned that they actually do stretch, and your inch can then become slightly larger than actual inch, then it's going to make a difference. But yeah, if you just use the same measuring gauge across the whole process, you should be fine.
Definitely. Oh, Celia, thank you. Always room for learning. Yes, been doing it 45 years. And that's the great thing about all of these arts and crafts, you know, and fiber arts, is that you never finish learning, do you?
No.
And as designers, we are pushing ourselves to come up with new things for you and new ways of doing things, and like finding all these kind of hacks that everyone's finding. It's amazing, isn't it? You never know everything. In fact, my mum belongs to a crochet group, and she went the other day and she said, oh, there's someone that's chatting about this. What's this Tunisian crochet, Hannah? What's that all about? Or is that, and like, she's been knitting and crocheting for like so many years, and she was like, I don't know what that is. Like, of course you're not going to know if you've never come across it. So
yeah, she's discovered a whole new world now, hasn't she?
Wow.
Because
She's not sure about it though, because she's a really, really good knitter, and she was like, I don't like this idea of it being sort of like knitting and sort of like crochet. I was like, just don't worry about it.
yeah.
Oh, some advice about tools. Did I write anything down for the gauge? I can't remember.
Just flicking back through the comments.
Oh, someone messaged me this question saying, is it better? I think I probably know what you're going to say. Is it better to try and adjust your gauge, or should you just fudge it and add and subtract from the pattern? Like, which is easier, which is better?
Oh, well, you know what I'm going to say. I'm going to say try and adjust your gauge. I mean, look, it depends how much you love maths, and it depends how complicated the pattern is. And like, I don't know, I guess how stubborn you are about your tension if you really don't want to change it.
Yeah.
Like, there's lots of things. If it's a simple, like, I don't know, the garment is 2 rectangular panels, look, you can probably fudge it. But if there's shaping, if it has a top-down yoke and there's lots of increases and there's different rates of increases for the bust and sleeves and things, like, I don't want to rewrite that pattern. If it was me, I would rather just follow the pattern. So it depends a bit on the complexity of the pattern, I think.
I wonder if there's also an element there of, or it certainly would have been for me when I first started, of like, I don't really understand gauge, so I feel like it might be easier just to fudge it in. But I think if people really understand the fundamentals of gauge and how actually it is, once you get it, is actually quite straightforward, then actually that's a much easier option than trying to change a pattern.
Yeah,
I agree.
So yeah, I would also try and do the gauge.
I mean, there is a bit of a learning curve, like knowing if you have to go up a hook size or down a hook size, or what you might need to adjust. Yeah, and I'm not even going to try and say it now because I know I'm going to get it wrong.
Down, I can't remember.
Yeah, I know. I still have to think. I have it written down, and then I just look at that sometimes. Yeah.
Oh, lots of people saying thank you for a lovely day of learning. Look forward to tomorrow. Yay! Fun meeting you.
It was fun meeting all of you guys watching and firing all these questions and comments.
Someone who's saying COVID prevented me from being in my 9-year-old granddaughter, now 13. In the meantime, she's taught herself to crochet and she's actually designing projects. That's amazing.
Fantastic.
So many more younger people, younger people doing it now, isn't there?
Yeah, well, we hope she has been watching a summit and she's going to be the new and upcoming garment designer.
Yeah.
Hopefully, after all these lessons, she should be halfway there before we dive into day 2 tomorrow.
Gosh, it's 8 o'clock here. My gosh. I'm just in the time. Wait, I'll pop the codes back up. So if you haven't already, I'm sure you already have, but if you haven't already, click on this code and I will share, where is it? Because this has got the schedule and everything ready for tomorrow.
Yeah.
You can go ahead if you've got time now, because I know it's not as late in the evening as in various parts of the world. So if you've got some time this afternoon, go through the schedule and you can, what's the word I want to say? You can schedule the lives, can't you? The premieres.
To click, click the notify me buttons.
You can say on YouTube, yes, please notify me when they go live, so you don't have to keep track of everything. Your phone or your device will just say to you, here we go, off you go. And then come and join us for the live sessions afterwards.
Yeah.
But if you do want to upgrade to get your all access pass, that is still available, and you get Sarah, you're wearing your top, aren't you? That's in there.
I'm wearing my top. Yeah, it's a bit too cold to just have the top on, so it's kind of a summer top, but I'll just show you at the top of it.
We've done a collection of 15 pattern PDFs collected from all of the designers to kind of showcase the topic that they're talking about and stuff. So that's Sarah's pattern that's available in there if you purchase the all access pass. But yeah, otherwise, I think have I just missed a question at the end?
I think there's somebody said they're gutted they missed today as they're wanting to crochet clothing for myself. So you have got actually two options. The free summit continues tomorrow with those lessons, and all the links to the videos that premiered today will be still available on the summit page that you can scan, or you can click the link in the comments. So if you want to double up tomorrow, start bright and early and rewatch day one videos. They still will be available, even the amazing gauge video by Sarah. So you can go back to it and rewatch it tomorrow before we kick off day two. But we do have to just remind people that those videos might disappear after the summit's finished. So after the end of tomorrow, I know that at least one video will be going. So there is the all access pass that is still available at the special summit price this weekend before it gets a little bit more expensive for the last couple of days that it's actually available in this format. So yeah, don't hesitate. There is still a couple of options for you how you can get all the content that we've been sharing today.
Definitely. Cool. I think.
Right.
That's it. I think that's it for today. Oh my goodness, we did it. Yay.
Yeah, well done, guys. It's been a long day for you.
Honestly, it's been absolutely amazing, and I can't believe there are still so many people here with us. We can see how many of you are there. So thank you everyone for joining us, and I hope that you've got lots and lots of tidbits and information and stuff, and that you've enjoyed it as much as we have.
Yes, it's been fantastic. Yeah.
Definitely. Oh, thank you, everyone. Yep. So thank you ever so much, Sarah, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting me and for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Like we said, we couldn't think of anyone better for the job.
Definitely. All embarrassed, aren't you? You're like, no.
Yeah.
Bless you. So we will see everyone tomorrow bright and early if you're in EST time. We are changing our clocks tonight here in the UK, so hopefully that will happen automatically on most modern devices and stuff. And we've planned all of the timings tomorrow in EST.
That's
so
right.
Make sure you check. If you are over here in the UK and the time zone is changing, it might shuffle to something you're not expecting tomorrow. We hope we've worked it out correctly. If not, we'll be here some point tomorrow to join you, I promise.
No, we will be, because our clocks are going forward again, so we'll go back to the 5-hour difference. So,
yeah. Oh, it hurt our brains. It hurt our brains to work it out, but we did it.
We started 8 a.m. in EST tomorrow, which is 1 o'clock for us, Hannah. Yes. Set your alarm.
I don't know, just message me when I need to go.
Yes, no, we will be here regardless for day 2 of the Crochet Garments with Confidence Summit, and we hope that all you guys will come back to join us for day 2. Invite all your crochet buddies, invite all your friends, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.